Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon. And thank you for indulging us in terms of the time. I'm going to read out a statement that speaks to developments in the area of economic transformation in the recent past. And we will cover a number of those which will be responded to extensively as soon as I finish reading the statement. And again, we are joined by Comrade Pakstow, as well as Comrade Sputla Kosienzo Ramokgopa, as previously introduced. I'm going to read the ANC statement, and it reads as follows. The ANC welcomes bold interventions to accelerate economic transformation, employment, and inclusive growth. ANC welcomes the decisive economic, fiscal, and industrial interventions being implemented in line with the ANC's 2024 election manifesto and the historic vision of the Freedom Charter that says the people shall share in the country's wealth. These interventions reaffirm the ANC's role as the leader of society and the primary driver of transformation in South Africa's economy. We acknowledge that South Africa's economy continues to face structural challenges. The unexpected 0.3% contraction in Q3 of 2024 financial year, largely due to the devastating drought and pressure in key sectors such as steel, confirms the importance of resilience, industrial diversification, and climate-smart growth. However, we remain encouraged by stabilizing business confidence, steady investment flows, and rising manufactured exports to Africa, all of which suggest that the country is on a path of gradual recovery. We are going to speak about a budget which needs to work for the many and not the few. The ANC supports the current budget proposal as a progressive and balanced response to the urgent task of stabilizing public finances while stimulating inclusive growth and protecting the poor. The budget allocates 61 cents of every rand to the social wage, including education, healthcare, and social protection, reaffirming the ANC's commitment to a developmental state that intervenes decisively to change the material conditions of the poor and the working class. The ANC further welcomes the proposed allocation of 1 trillion rands over the medium term towards infrastructure focused on roads, ports, rail, and energy, which are key to unlocking job creation, industrialization, and economic integration. We also note the proposed 15 billion rands injection into the presidential employment stimulus as a direct intervention to tackle youth unemployment. We endorsed the proposed expansion of the zero-rated VAT food basket, a critical mechanism to cushion low-income households against rising food prices. This is in line with the ANC's pro-poor policies, and we continue to support further engagements with stakeholders to expand this list responsibly and sustainably. Importantly, the ANC maintains its position that the national budget must not only rely on unsustainable borrowing. Fiscal discipline must support, not undermine, our developmental goals. Every rand must serve the transformation of our economy and the upliftment of our people. We turn to infrastructure and industrialization, building the economy from the ground up. We welcome the billions being unlocked through Infrastructure South Africa. Currently, 17 major projects worth over 233 billion rands are under construction, with a further 169 billion rands in procurement. These projects directly support spatial transformation, township and rural development, and create employment and modernizing of public infrastructure. The Welisizwe Bridges program, with over 40 bridges completed and 54 under construction, ensures that children can safely reach schools, communities can access essential services, and that no citizen is cut off from opportunity due to unsafe rivers or washed out roads. We further acknowledge the collaboration between the Ministries of Police and the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure in tackling the scourge of extortion in the construction sector. Since October 2024, over 745 extortion cases have been recorded, with 240 arrests, demonstrating the ANC-led government's zero tolerance for criminal networks threatening our national infrastructure program. We now speak about measures of delivering on the ANC manifesto, as well as the January 8th commitments. The ANC notes concrete progress being made to give effect to our elections manifesto and the January 8th statement, the program of action of the ANC for 2025. Among these, we talk about the stabilization of leadership in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and its entities. We welcome the election of Her Excellency Lerato Mataboge to the African Union Commission as Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy. Government engagement with ArcelorMittal South Africa to protect 100,000 jobs in the steel sector and the related value chain. Over 29 billion rands secured in private sector investment, including projects by Yenfeng Plastic Omnium, FAW at Kucha SEZ, and Ogihara South Africa at Dube Trade Port. Operational special economic zones have also reported over 30 billion rands in investment and over 27,000 permanent jobs. Manufacturing exports to Africa grew by 5.1% quarter on quarter, reaching 203 billion rands between July and November 2024. The disbursement of 3 billion rands in incentives, of which 807 million rands went to black industrialists and 437 million went to SMMEs. The creation of over 9,000 new jobs from incentive-supported projects, with more than 4,700 jobs in the global business services sector, 93% of them which are occupied by young people. The expansion of employee ownership models, benefiting over 7,900 additional workers in diverse sectors, from cold storage to IT. Service exports reached over 7 billion for global business services from April to December. We talk about regulating the economy to serve the public interest. ANC also supports the interventions underway to reduce market concentration and promote price fairness. This includes inquiries and actions by the Competition Commission into sectors such as polymers, healthcare, online platforms, and energy pricing. Recent settlements, including the 14 million rands administrative penalty paid by Victron Energy and the withdrawal of anti-competitive agreements by Vita Gas, demonstrate a regulatory state that is acting decisively to create a fairer economy. We celebrate the recognition of the Social Employment Fund, which was recently awarded Prosperity Catalyst Award at the prestigious Bay Urban Visioning Awards in Bilbao, Spain. This international acknowledgement of South Africa's innovation in social employment demonstrates the South Africa's ability to lead both locally and globally in inclusive development. As we conclude, the ANC reaffirms that economic transformation is not a slogan. It is a program of action. The current policy interventions, budget proposals, and program implementation show that this is a government at work, stabilizing the economy, protecting the poor, creating jobs, and laying the foundation for sustainable growth. We urge all our deployees, our alliance partners, and sectors of society to remain focused and united behind the goal of building a capable developmental state, reducing inequality, and restoring the dignity of our people. The ANC remains steadfast. The wealth of the country must serve the people, not the few. We end there. Colleagues, I will then, at this stage, call on yourselves where there are questions. I've got SABC and ENCA. SABC? Do we have newsroom? Is that an indication, Bravo? Oh, okay, okay. Let's go.
Thank you. It's Kanima Panga from SABC News. Thank you. You've said that you stand by the budget as it is. We know that there are some contested elements of that budget, such as the VAT increase. How will you get it passed? The public want to know who will be backing the ANC in getting that budget passed.
Thank you very much.
I'm covered.
Let's take a newsroom.
I'm covered.
You're covered by that. All right.
If you didn't cover and say.
Okay. ENCA?
Thank you very much, Player Treaty Jones, ENCA. I just want to know if the NEC, for the past 2 days, have discussed this issue of the budget. Have you discussed who's supporting you? And just your reaction on what the DA has said, that the talks have broken down, that they're not willing to compromise if you're not doing away with the VAT hike increase and the redress and transformation policies. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Can I add to that one?
SABC?
Sorry, can I add to that one?
Yes.
I also wanted to ask about the relationship with the DA and the ANC. Of course, this is just one issue, and because of the ideological differences between the two parties, you're going to run into a number of challenges. Is there always going to be a situation where there is this kind of barter and trade between the two parties where one has to get their way in order for the GNU to move forward? Or does this spell the end of this relationship and maybe the ANC looking for different partners in the GNU that carry the same type of, goals towards the people of South Africa?
Thank you very much. I will, we've got City Press.
Nomen Masungwini from City Press. Did the NEC discuss the next move or the plan since the DA said they're not going to support this? What will be the next move for the ANC so that they get the budget to be passed? Because there has been negotiations or engagement with the MK party and the EFF. Is there a resolution that shows that maybe you are willing to give one of the two parties a chance to be part of the GNU? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are just going to do one round, colleagues, so let's get as many as possible because some of them are interrelated. Business Day?
Just about the prospects of the VAT hike, the prospects that it could have on the ANC showing in the 2026 elections, since the VAT hike is probably going to hurt the majority of the ANC's voters the most?
Thank you. ENCA?
Just again, obviously there's been controversy around how some officials from the US have made mention of or touted rather targeted sanctions against ANC leaders. Did you discuss this as well in the NEC meeting or during the NEC meeting?
Thank you very much.
Only one round.
The public broadcaster keeps talking.
Said
Let's continue.
it was one last round.
SABC, and then I'll go back to Tando, and then end with the newsroom.
Can I also just check, it's a bit off topic, but if the NEC has considered that the NUM National Political Council yesterday decided to recommend to its June Congress that the union should support the SACP at the next election. Is there any concerns about the unions turning against the ANC ahead of 2026, if that has been discussed or not?
I'm glad that you said it's off topic. Then I will take Prabhu.
Just from whatever conversations you may have heard, have any possibilities been raised as to where the money that is supposed to come from VAT could possibly come from?
Thank you very much. City Press?
The follow-up to Pule's question is that there are talks about the ANC trying to have a resolution to remove some of the US the USA goods or things that are being sold in South Africa. Was that discussed, or is there a resolution of that nature?
Thank you very much. I'm going to, also, before I turn to Comrade Parks and Comrade Sputler, let me take Business Day.
So the budget doesn't make any direct allocation from any of the implications of the geopolitical situation, especially the Trump matter and how it could affect just South Africa's budget. Did the ANC, ETC discuss this at all? How do you build a resilient strategy towards it? What does the ANC propose with regards to that? And then the ANC has been very vocal about it having a wider say in how the budget is constructed before it is tabled in Parliament. What were the outcomes of the discussions within the ETC? What does greater scrutiny of the budget require from the ANC, apart from the processes that are currently underway in Parliament, of course with the ANC's participation?
Thank you.
Sorry,
Back
just
to ANC.
yeah. I just want to find out, did you involve all dispute mechanisms within the GNU, including the clearinghouse mechanism in relation to the budget between yourselves and the DA? And do you not regard yourselves negotiating with other parties outside the GNU as a betrayal to those parties who are inside of the GNU? Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. I consider that sorted. I can now turn to yourself, comrades, to respond to the question.
Okay, this might be tricky. I might become a bit tall. Yeah, well, today has been interesting. We came here to talk about local government, and we discussed the economy. And then we came to talk about the economy, and we're discussing governance. But that notwithstanding, I think the issues in many ways are related. The first point that we should make relates to the government of national unity itself. As you would know, the ANC, after the elections in 2024, having analyzed the elections, the NEC gave direction to a team led by the Secretary General to engage various parties on the establishment of government. We reached out to parties on the basis of establishing a government of national unity, established on the basis of a statement of intent, which statement of intent included, in the first instance, the foundational principles of the GNU. It included a minimum program of action and included mechanisms of governance, which would include dispute resolution, etc. And it's the basis on which we went to literally every single party represented in Parliament. Literally every single party. And we engaged with literally every single party about the establishment of a government of national unity. Some parties agreed, some parties did not agree, but we ultimately established a government of national unity on the basis of the statement of intent. Even then, we said that with those parties that are not in the government, we believe that we're at a moment in this country where we need all voices on board to define where we're going collectively as a country to confront and deal with the challenges that we confront. I thought it's important to start there because then you would understand that, in fact, we have never stopped talking to any party. Whether formally or informally, we've never stopped talking to any party. Some of them would have raised issues that they still want to discuss with us, and we've kept our doors open for those discussions. Even as it relates to the passing of the budget, the ANC is engaging all parties. Because in essence, when you go and pass a budget, you need to ensure that you get the maximum number of members of parliament to agree with you on the budget. So we've engaged all parties and continue to engage parties around the budget and how we engage on the budget. Those discussions are ongoing, so I think that the team responsible for those negotiations are probably better placed to deal with the detail of where those discussions are, but I can confirm that the discussions are ongoing. I imagine that those discussions would continue, possibly up to the last minute when we go to Parliament on Wednesday. Now, what does it mean about the relationship of parties in the GNU and invoking the mechanisms that are available? Firstly, I should say that in government, all parties in the GNU were engaged on the budget, on the proposals, both on the revenue side and on the expenditure side. And all parties indicated their views, and agreement was agreed on a process going forward on how to deal with matters related to the budget. Of course, this is the first time we went into a budget process as the GNU, so there are lessons that we've learned from that process, including the time of engagement, how you interface between the government processes and parties, how you recognize the role of the Minister of Finance in terms of what the Constitution dictates against the reality that you're engaging, that you need to engage other parties. So you need to balance all those factors, and I think we've learned lessons from this process about how to manage these issues going forward. So we maintain that on the basis of the statement of intent, parties that still subscribe to the statement of intent would remain in the GNU. If there is a party that chooses otherwise, they would have made a decision like other parties had made before. And it changes the dynamics on how the GNU is constituted. But we continue to work on the basis that we've reached out to every single party that's represented in Parliament that has a right to participate in the GNU. Now, I think that when you talk budget, it is important that you talk both about the revenue side in as much as you talk about the expenditure side. what are the key areas of investment that the country needs to make? Certainly, as indicated in the statement, a commitment to ensure that we're able to address the plight and needs of the poor and consolidate, in essence, what constitutes the social wage. And this would include elements such as free basic water, free basic electricity, grants across the board that would include grants in relation to old age, disability grants, child support grants, including, of course, access to health and other facilities that government provides. It also includes the social relief of distress grant that was introduced during COVID. Now, when you look at the expenditure side and you say, how do we address these expenditure pressures, you have to take into account how you're going to raise revenue to manage that. Now, we've agreed on a process that says Parliament is considering the proposals with regards to the revenue proposals that would include the 0.5% VAT increase. This report would be provided to Parliament when Parliament considers the report that comes to it in relation to what's the way forward in that regard. But equally, when you deal about revenue, you're cognizant that if I cut on the revenue side, I have to cut on the expenditure side. And you have to make priority decisions. To cut, you would realize that the budget also extensively invests in economic development and growth. The 1 trillion rand infrastructure investment over the medium term is part of those initiatives to address binding constraints to growth in our economy, network industries, and in fact counter-cyclical investments in infrastructure. So you have to balance that this budget is able to do those things. But we've equally said government should also initiate a process that comprehensively looks at the entire budget. But you can't make a decision that places the budget at risk when you have dealt with the expenditure side without dealing with the revenue side. But a commitment has been made that a process would be kick-started to address comprehensively areas that we think there are efficiencies that we can gain from the budget. But these processes, you can't do it at the same time. You can't say, let me cut expenditure or let me reduce revenue and maintain expenditure on the basis of work that I still have to do. You say, well, okay, let me balance the budget whilst working on addressing certain fundamental issues that are in the budget. I think I've commented on the bulk of the issues. I should say that the NEC is engaged in a discussion on the reconfiguration of the alliance and issues that impact on the reconfiguration of the alliance. It's premature at this stage to comment on that because it's a discussion that's currently in session. So issues around the NUM, SACP, and so on are part of that broader discussion that's taking place. Thank you very much. I've left the difficult ones to comment.
Thank you very much for those questions. Maybe just to make the point that we had an extensive discussion. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And it had to wait for me to get to.
We have a very caring media in South Africa.
Yeah. So maybe to make the point that we have had extensive engagement on the international balance of forces. So invariably in that conversation we did have an extensive reflection on the flurry of executive orders coming from out of the US. And our view is the following, is that it is not our intention to prescribe on the foreign policy of sovereign jurisdictions. So whatever the determination that is made by the Trump administration, it's a function of their own domestic considerations. But as the ANC, we are of the opinion that we must continue to engage with the Trump administration because it's in our interest as the second trade partner to South Africa. And it's not our intention to undermine that relationship. Of course, we do admit that it is at its all-time low, at least in the post-apartheid era. And of course, the counsel was that the president will, at the right time, as he determines, find a way of ensuring that we continue to have a channel and a path of engagement with the U.S. administration. So if the intention is to target the blacklisting of certain ANC leaders and the like, it's a choice that they are making. But our view is that we will continue to invest in that relationship because it's of significant importance to us, as is other relationship with other jurisdictions across the world. Of course, it will be naive of us not to admit that some of the executive orders, to the extent that there could be an introduction of tariff levied on the goods from South Africa entering the United States, if there could be the prospect of us removed from AGOA, it will have significant implications on the South African economy, on the jobs, and that's why it is important that government must continue to invest in that relationship. Of course, we are realistic about what we confronted with, and that's why it is the collective view of the NEC that we must continue to have that engagement. Government will have those engagements. The Minister of DTIC is having those engagements to ensure that we protect, if you like, our presence in AGOA. And I think it's a conversation that will be led in government. Someone asked the question if we have any intention of removing American-produced products from South Africa from the shelves. No, there's never been such a consideration. Like I said, I mean, we know that we are going through a very difficult period, a very difficult moment, but we are going to invest in the preservation of that relationship. And just to add on what Corporate Parks was saying, I mean, outside the budget, I think we need to resolve the issues around the growth. And that's why it's important that these trade relationships must be protected. But also what this encounter has illustrated to us, something that we have had long discussions about if we had to go into the literature and the archives of the ANC, some of the resolutions that we have taken before, the need for us to be self-sufficient. Of course, we do accept that there's a global value chain, so we're not naive to suggest that we are a closed economy, we are an open, small economy. So what happens outside the borders of this country has got huge implications on the performance of the South African economy. But one of the things that has come alive, and in fact is a primary preoccupation of our conversation, is the need for us to ensure that they were able to beneficiate at source some of the minerals that will underpin, if you like, clean technologies, the battery economy, that will underpin the progression and the expansion of artificial intelligence are found in our country. So we must design a response that is going to help us going into the future for us to be able to be one of the major exporters of the finished products in that area. Of course, it's going to require a great level of coordination, underpinned by industrial policy, supported by energy policy, the policy around what we designate as critical minerals. It might require some trade and policy instruments to support that. So part of the assignment that has been given to government was that we must make that possible going into the future. So yes, we are concerned about the state of the relationship. Like I said, we'll continue to engage. As the President has said before, we will not use megaphone diplomacy. We'll find the right channels at the right time. The President will make that determination as to when is the right time, what are the right channels. But South Africa is determined to ensure that we protect that relationship and ensure that we continue to support the South African economy. Yeah, I think the rest Parks has dealt with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. I certain that we have responded to your questions, to your satisfaction. I don't see a nay, so I take it that we can adjourn. I am going to reopen another round, comrades, so that we address matters to the satisfaction of our colleagues. Let me start this side, start with you, Bravuyo, and then just in that order. We have a comprehensive statement that even talks about the return on investments that have been made by South Africa. It's not only the national budget and the GNU.
Yes, but the big elephant in the room is 0.5% VAT. Have you discussed, or as things stand, is 0.5% VAT increase still on the table, even in conversations you're having with the DA or the members of the GNU, as well as those Paxtar was saying you never stopped talking to or engaging with from the time the results of last year's election were known.
Thank you very much. That's now SABC.
Thank you. And to add to that, I know that Mr. Tawe has said that there is a delegation dealing with this issue, but I think a lot of it is still in the public domain. And we're asking if the DA has put forward this letter to you to say that if this is not taken off the cards, that we will not support the budget, and then turned around and said as well that if you turn to opposition parties, then we are no longer part of this agreement. We're asking about that political dynamic and whether the ANC has considered that risk, and if it has, then what is the future for the budget as well as the GNU?
Clearly my question is not working. Please go ahead.
Zara Kroneveld, SABC News. This is a follow-up on ENCA's previous question, just about the ANC stand on the clearinghouse mechanism. Has the budget been a topic of discussion within that mechanism, and how does the ANC feel about the clearinghouse? Do they feel it's an effective mode of dispute resolution within the GNU? And if it was discussed, what were the outcomes of which? Has the discussion been completed, or is it still ongoing within the clearinghouse? Thank you.
Thank you very much. ENCA.
Yeah, ENCA. Lady Chidi Jones. Mr. Dow, I just want to ask again. I know you say that we have been engaging all parties, and you engage all parties up until the last minute when you're going to party. Is there a set date as to when you will be speaking to the DA again? Because you understand that they've made it quite clear that talks have fallen. We're not looking at talking to you until there's a compromise. So is there an allocated date as to when you've been speaking to them? And just to confirm, has the NEC spoken about this issue? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suspect that's the last hand. Okay. Comments? I think we should. Sure.
Yeah. Well, clearly the responses in your calculations were not sufficient, and some parts of what I'll be saying really it will be an amplification of what Comrade Parks has raised earlier on. So we make the point that the first is that there's a budget proposal that is before us. So Minister Godongwana, capacity as Minister of Finance, tabled before the National Assembly a budget, and that budget is a culmination of engagement at cabinet level, essentially representing what is the net view of cabinet. So that's what is presented before the National Assembly. And then from our side as the African National Congress, we do accept the fact that we don't have the necessary votes to get the budget over the line on our own. And a number of parties, including those that are outside the GNU, had raised issues, reservations around, in particular, the issue of 0.5 VAT increase. The point that Minister Tau was making earlier on is the following, is that everyone is agreeable on the expenditure side. The need for us to be able to ensure that we maintain the guardrails from a social wage point of view, the need to take care of the poor, to broaden the social wage, and in fact the proposal in the budget is that the increases in relation to the cash transfers to the poor is above inflation. An admission that we do accept that people are going through an exceptionally difficult period. And then we answer the question, how are you going to finance it? We did make the point that in our discussions, the deliberations in Cabinet, we did generate 5 options, and those options have got multiple permutations on the sources of the revenue, including the various scales of VAT increases, and also an option of not increasing VAT, and allowed Minister Godongwana, together with the Treasury team, to look at the most plausible way of ensuring that we don't place an additional burden on South Africa. Not just the poor, the middle class are also under significant strain. And then they've come back, arrived at the determination that in the first year, 0.5% VAT increase, and if the interventions that we're proposing are not going to yield the kind of results that we desire, we'll then look at an additional 0.5% in the coming financial year. So that is what is before us. So part of the conversations that are happening, led by the Chief Whip of the ANC, as we engage various parties, we do make the point, we are not only limited to the parties that are in the GNU, principally the DA and the Freedom Front Plus, because out of the total members of the GNU, it is those parties that have raised reservations around the 0.5%. So we said that we are going to expand that discussion and conversation to other parties. That discussion, in our view, should not threaten the stability and the existence of the GNU. We are invested in the GNU because it's our own creation. We are the ones who have put it together. And in fact, from the onset, we did make the point that we are inviting all parties to be part of the GNU. So certainly there are no parameters on who we can engage in relation to getting the budget over the line. If in the calculation of other members of the GNU is that this is a red line, I'm sure they'll make their own determination. But in our view is that we have sufficiently canvassed. We'll listen to the other parties. The negotiators will then come back. Will come back, at least the mechanism of the ANC, the leadership of the ANC, the president, of course, in partly to the House, the ANC caucus, to say these are the options that have been placed before us. Because remember, we have agreed on the expenditure side. We must agree on how are we going to match the revenue to be able to support that expenditure. The proposal we have put forward is a 0.5% increase. If there are other ideas outside the 0.5%, the colleagues will come back and present to us, and that calculation will be made. So we accept that we are living it's a new normal. So it doesn't follow, because we don't have the numbers, that what we say goes. So we are going to invest in these discussions and negotiations. So our plea is that we must afford that conversation to happen. I want to restate the following fact that Minister Godongwana has made, and in fact even the Cabinet, through the statement of Cabinet as read by Minister Nchaven, is the following. We think there is no relationship between the conversations on the budget, how it must be financed, the funding thereof and the expenditure, and the other principal legislations in the Expropriation Act, the BELA and the NHI. The President had an obligation to sign those pieces of legislation. And these are legacy legislation that comes from the 6th administration. Constitutionally, the President is obliged, unless if he's able to identify those issues that will not meet the constitutional master. So those are passed. So there is no relationship. That's the point that we are making. What is before us is the budget, is the fiscal framework. To the extent that there are challenges with regards to the fiscal framework, let's have a conversation on that. So the long and short is that it's still on the table. That's the basis of negotiation and discussion. And we don't think that should threaten the GNU. I've made the point earlier on, we're invested in the success of the GNU. It's our own creation. We want to preserve it, if anything, consolidate it, and make sure that we are able to proceed. There is nothing in that statement of intent that says those that are outside can't be engaged on any matter. I think it will be a height of folly just to lock ourselves in not talking to others. So we accept that they are part of the opposition. Will continue to engage, like we engage, for an example, at the various portfolio committees, at least as far as energy is concerned. We engage with all the parties across the table. So those conversations are happening, if you like. So the political dynamic you're talking about, the tension that is induced by, if you like, the differences between some of the principal actors in the GNU, whether that's going to threaten the GNU, at least the version of the ANC is that we don't think that should threaten the existence of the GNU. And we do accept that from time to time you are going to have this tension, and that's why in our own calibration on how we are going to manage the GNU, we have set up that clearinghouse that is led by President Mashatil. There's about 2 or 3 items that they've been able to solve, they've been able to smooth. And so, yes, it's got a track record of showing success. Even this conversation had happened through that discussion. The President, in fact, put together a smaller team of the parties of the GNU to discuss the issues of the budget. And then it culminated in what we had tabled in the cabinet. So we're investing in the success of the GNU, and accept that from time to time we are going to have this kind of setbacks. So that, as a dispute resolution mechanism, it does work. And as you know, we have institutionalized it. And of course, it can take various shapes and form as and when we are confronted by certain difficulties and challenges. Like I've made the point, when we're engaging on the budget, there was that smaller team that said, I think they had 2 to 3 iterations of those discussions, generating the options that were presented before Cabinet. Cabinet approved those options, and it was leaning towards, I think, 2 of these options, and gave the responsibility to the Minister of Finance to finalize and come back. The Minister then came back. Cabinet, we agreed, the net Cabinet, there will be other voices that express views different from what is before us, like we do on many occasions, items before Cabinet. But the net result is that Cabinet then endorsed, and that's what is the basis for negotiations and discussion. We'll allow that those negotiations to unfold. They'll go throughout the night, but we are confident that we should be in a position to get the budget over the line and ensure that there's certainty on spending going into the future. And the last point I want to make is that we must resolve the growth story. Otherwise, we are tinkering at the edges. If we don't get the economy on the right path, we are likely going to end up in the same situation. It will be more acute because the deficit will be significantly higher. The demand side on the expenditure will continue to grow because people will be out of employment, will be hemorrhaging jobs if the economy is not growing, and will need to support this, if you like, that expenditure. And that's why embedded in what Minister Godongwana presented is the issues around the 1 trillion rand of infrastructure funding over the medium term. We accept that for the economy to grow at the levels that we desire, gross fixed capital investment, which is a proxy for investment, should be about 30% of GDP. As I speak to you, are at about 14.9%, and that's why we must accelerate that. And we also identify that the foundational network industries, water, energy, and freight rail are going to be the priority sectors, and supported by the instruments, the levers that the Minister of DTIC has to ensure that we are able to build this momentum. So we also, the budget addresses the growth story, but the point is the now. You need money now to support these expenditures. So as we have this conversation around the growth story, we have to find sources of revenue to support this. And that's why the 0.5% is before us. Like I said, we'll continue to engage. And we don't think, at least as far as the ANC is concerned, that is an existential challenge to the GNU. That's our vision. Others might have their own vision. We invested in the success of the GNU. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just to reaffirm the point that the National Executive Committee of the ANC took a decision relating to the establishment of a government of national unity. That decision has not been amended. If that decision is amended, it would be communicated. So to the extent that you say the ANC discussed changes of this party, that party, we have not varied our decision. And I think it's an important point to emphasize. Of course, the NEC is in session. It is at liberty, as you can imagine, to have that discussion. But at this point, that decision has not been varied. The second point is that, and you know, we cautioned when we engaged in the negotiations to establish the GNU, you can't negotiate through the newspaper or TV. You can't negotiate through the media. When you negotiate, you have to negotiate as parties and avoid posturing in engagements and negotiations. And we'll continue to engage to suggest to all those that engage with our teams that are currently engaging with them to protect the integrity of the negotiations underway. So we have always avoided to negotiate on the basis of press statements and so on. There are intense discussions that are ongoing, and I think we should try and preserve that principle. The other point I thought I should make is that, you know, it is also important that members of cabinet stick to the oath that we all took, so that when we serve in cabinet, we serve on the basis of the oath that we took in front of the people of this country, in front of the Chief Justice, and contribute on that basis. So I can tell you that, in fact, at least we as members of the ANC in that cabinet engage robustly on any matter. On any matter, we don't start by going to look for a party position before assuming our responsibility. Of course, there's broad policy guidelines and direction that the ANC has given, but there's also a risk that you go into meetings and you start by saying, well, imagine a cabinet that says we need to go and caucus. There's a risk if you do that. There are huge risks. My last point that I thought I should make is that it is very, very disingenuous when political parties say, well, actually, we can agree to the 0.5% and then make political demands, not budget demands, political demands. It's a big risk. And I think it's important that we are conscious of that. Because sometimes when people say, well, we took a principled decision, when in fact you're trying to extract political concessions, I think it's an unfortunate thing. And I do think that it's important for all of us to be held accountable for our conduct in government, our conduct in parliament, and indeed our conduct in front of the people of South Africa. So we can't do things that try and extract political concessions and pretend that you're actually discussing revenue. I thought I'll make that statement so that it is very clear sometimes what some of the postures are about by certain people. Thank you very much.
That is our parting shot. With that, yes, true story. Yes, so the conversation about the budget, as said, is ongoing, but the negotiations must stick to the budget and not seek to reconstruct the policy environment in South Africa or to change the laws of the country. There are processes for that. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Updates on tomorrow's program.
We will do that immediately after this. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. You don't want to go. We are adjourned.
And we must be NEC also.